Bandwidth for Changelog is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com, and we're hosted on Linode servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. This episode is brought to you by Hired. Hired matches outstanding people with the world's most innovative tech companies out there. Hired uses an algorithmic job matching tool in combination with a talent advocate who will walk you through the entire process of finding a better job. You might be looking for a more flexible work schedule, more money, or remote jobs so you can travel and see the world. You might be looking for opportunities at Facebook, Mixpanel, or Squarespace, or the many other top tech companies out there looking for engineers on Hired. You and your skills can be a valuable asset to any of these companies. You just have to take the first step. That first step is hired.com/changelog. Go there, learn more. Our listeners get a special $600 hiring bonus when you find your next opportunity on Hired. Once again, hired.com/changelog. From Changelog Media, you're listening to the Changelog, a podcast featuring the hackers, leaders, and innovators of open source. I'm Adam Stacoviak, editor-in-chief of Changelog. On today's show, we're sharing 3 conversations we had at Sustain, which is a one-day conversation for open source software sustainers that was held at GitHub HQ back in June. We talked with Richard Littauer about scaling open source maintenance and models to avoid burnout. Karthik Ram, the project lead of R OpenSci, an organization who develops open source R packages for the data science community. We talk about how they plan to support and scale their thriving open science tools. And last, we talk with Andrea Goulet and Scott Ford, who run a consultancy called Corgi Bytes, about legacy code and modernizing existing software applications.
Okay, so now I'm recording. So, Richard, tell me your full name.
My name is Richard Littauer.
And you're with Maintainer.io.
Maintainer.io is my main thing at the moment, yes.
But what I want to talk about is theuserisdrunk.com.
The User is Drunk is a thing I did a few years ago where I launched a website where people could pay me money to get drunk and then look at their website from a UX perspective. Ridiculous, but it went viral, and that was it.
It went viral and then it dissipated and died.
It went viral, and then I had to raise the price to the point where people would stop buying it because I couldn't drink that much, and it's a non-sustainable business model.
Would you actually become intoxicated?
Yes.
And then peruse websites?
Yes. And there's videos online.
For money?
Yeah.
Did the intoxication actually aid in your ability to suck at using the website?
It very much did. It also taught me a lot about what UX is and how it works.
Yeah.
It was a fun thing to do. I wrote a big retrospective on Medium about don't drink for money because you swiftly hate drinking. I actually quit for a year.
Yeah. Because
man. Anyway,
turns a hobby into a job real fast.
It does.
So tell me about this maintainer thing you're doing.
So I was the community manager de facto for IPFS for around a year and a half. And then in March, I decided to go out and do my own thing, which is Maintainer.io. And basically what I do is community management as a service. So I'll come into your organization and help you figure out how to take random repos on GitHub and turn them into a real community, to facilitate community growth, rather. I can't bring people on board, but I can make it easier for you to get people to code on your stuff.
So it seems a little bit odd to bring in an outsider to help build a community when it's isn't the people who are there the community? Is there?
But a lot of times they don't have the
there?
information. They don't have the knowledge of how to build a community. They don't know how to set up contributing docs or codes of conduct or readmes, or how to track different repos across an organization to make sure they're actively being maintained.
Sure. So it's a consulting situation.
It's like a consulting situation.
But you'll actually take the reins and get it going.
I get it going, and then I also, for solo developers, if you have too many issues, I help you maintain your stuff. I'm not going to do domain-specific PR reviews, but I can definitely figure out if your repository has the right level of documentation, if it's easy for people to become contributors and maintainers, and I can help with the issue triage and out-of-office replies.
Cool. So, you just kicked that off when? Recently, right?
Around 2.5 months ago.
2.5 months ago. Tell me, how's it going so far?
It's going great. I've had a lot of clients, had a great time working with them, and I've just signed a contract for around a month with a big charity in the UK, and I have a much bigger client on the way, hopefully. And things are just better than expectations.
Is this the kind of work that you really enjoy doing?
It is.
Why?
love technical stuff. I love getting deep into the code. But at the end of the day, what I enjoy doing is fixing spelling errors and making sure that it's easy for new developers to come on board. I like sharing that sort of energy.
Huh. So you have a vested interest in seeing open source sustain, of course, because you're like super invested completely into that.
Yep.
We're here at this sustain event today, late afternoon, so we've had most of the day. We're getting to the solutions section, but what are some highlights for you or takeaways you've had so far, conversations?
One of the great highlights was I had a meeting about what makes a good maintainer, and we sort of come away with the idea that's actually just self-awareness and being able to say, I'm good here, I'm not good there. And that was really good for me because one of the things that's missing in code is human empathy and being able to really think about who you are, emotionally, do you want to get involved in this, and the long emotional tail of code. And so it's good to have people here talking about that and not just being, code's just about the, semicolons. It's more than that.
So turning to yourself now, self-awareness.
Yep.
As somebody who sells maintainer services, what do you excel at and what do you struggle at with regards to software projects?
I excel at having new eyes on the project and figuring out if it's good for new developers and what it looks like if you want to become a maintainer. How easy is that? How hard is that? I excel at figuring that out, the DevX of open source code. I am not the best person to figure out if your implementation is spec compliant.
Okay. So are there certain kinds of technical projects that excite you more than others, or do you not care?
I love JavaScript stuff. I love NLP stuff. I was trained as a computational linguist. I love internationalization. And I'm a big fan of standards. I built a thing called Standard README, how to write a good README. And I love making things compliant to that. It's just kind of like pseudocode, pseudo-documentation.
Yeah. One of the things that we're doing here is actually going on right now as we speak is gathering examples of people who are doing it right.
Yep.
So as you've gone around helping other people do maintenance and building communities, what are some exemplars, in your opinion, of projects that you could turn to and say, do it like these guys and you're going to do well?
NPM does a lot of good stuff with their community. They're not perfect in some ways. The CLI tools and they've been really getting there hard, but their heart is in it, and you can see that, and I love that. Hoodie does it really well. They're all about community. They're all about how to do this. Node is getting there. I've been sitting in on some of the communications committee meetings, and they're working really hard to figure that out. Node Together was great. That's with Ashley. Big fan of a lot of high-level decisions like Go's decision to have a formatter. And so you just get rid of a lot of the issues that you have in other languages, like JavaScript. There's a lot of great projects, a lot of bad ones, but I love it when you can see that people really care, and it's obvious.
The problem with Go's formatter is it gives tabs to your code, and we all know that people who use tabs make less money.
I don't mind which god you worship, Well, it's all right.
It's objective now. People who use tabs make less money, so it's like the final Stack Overflow had the final say on the debate. No.
Just put a dot file in your repo to automatically convert them and move on.
There we go. Anything else about this event or about sustainability in general that you'd like to bring up as something you've learned or know or would like to have discussed more?
I would love to talk more about models for actually having people not burn themselves out at night. How can we make it easier for the hobbyist open sourcer to do this and love their work for years? A lot of us are young guys, young women as well. Sorry, I keep using the word guys. Young people, and we're starry-eyed and eager, and I've seen the other side of that as well.
Yeah.
And that's hard. So what I really love about this conversation here is that we're talking about sustainability, not just financial models, but also long-term, for the best of the project, for the best of the people, staying safe.
One thing I noticed when I asked you for examples, you gave Node, Hoodie, and NPM.
Yep.
And these are organizations.
Yep.
What about smaller scale? Like you said, a lot of us are hobbyists. We're individuals.
Yep.
Maybe we're a team of 2.
Yep.
First of all, are there any examples of people doing it well on the small?
Yeah, I really like Sindra Sorhez's way of doing things. I love how he has an AMA repo that has hundreds and thousands of stars, where you can just ask him questions. I've met him. He's just a really nice guy, and it shows in his code. It's idiosyncratic and lovely, and it's just this is what I do here. I mean, he's not a small example. He's the most prolific coder on GitHub.
Right.
But
it's small in terms of he has small projects, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oftentimes he's the only person who has, commits on those projects.
On the other side of things, Substack doesn't necessarily comment on everything, doesn't well document his stuff all the time, but you can see he's keeping the internet weird. And it's like, it's wonderful. It's just great to watch. I love his stuff. I'm trying to think of any particular people who just no one would know about who I really like, and I'm failing.
Yeah.
Nawful. Nawful has some really great stuff. He wrote a thing called Art of README, which just is a really passionate plea to have better documentation.
Yeah.
And he just writes these beautiful little modules that are really just empathetic. Here's where I'm coming from. Here's how you access my API. And I love it.
Huh, very cool. Going back to, is it Sindre? How do you say his name?
Sindre Soros?
Yeah, Sindre Soros. He often will hop into our ping repo. So we have a repo on GitHub where you can just drop projects, drop links, and we'll pick them up and tweet them, or we'll put them in our newsletter. And he'll often hop in there and drop things.
Yeah.
And every time I'm like, sure, we'll link this up. And then I'm like, we always try to get him to come on the changelog.
Yeah.
He's always like, no, I'm good.
No. Yeah. Good for him.
He just says no every time.
Good for him.
It's like, I feel like he's a person who really knows who he is.
Yeah, he does.
Which is cool.
I mean, I don't know him that well.
Yeah.
I had lunch with him once. That's about it. But seems like a great guy. And I have a soft spot in my heart for digital nomads, being one myself. Always on the road, always making new things. There's a guy here, Blake Embry, who's also like that.
Yeah.
And then two of the people from Open Collective worked at Cozy Rosengren's office. Casey made Hacker Paradise, which is this awesome.
We're big fans of Hacker Paradise. We've teamed up with them and sent a few people.
Oh, that's right. You did that. Yeah. I've been at Hacker Paradise 3 times.
Oh, really?
I love it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's wonderful.
So, yeah, I haven't mentioned yet. You said you're a digital nomad. Name some of the places that you've worked from around the world and some of your favorites.
In the past 2 months, I've worked from Reykjavik, Ireland, Edinburgh, Glasgow, the Highlands, London, Berlin, San Francisco, and Brussels. My favorite is Edinburgh. I went to uni there. That's my home. I did work on the bus from Reykjavik Airport into Reykjavik itself. That was really fun. Watson, with whom I basically sort of run Arctic.js, which happens every 2 years in Svalbard in the north of Norway.
I know where that is. I don't even
Svalbard is the northernmost human habitated place in the world.
Oh, okay.
We have a JavaScript conference there in the church, because why not? He has an NPM package called GeoPackage, which basically every time you push something to NPM, it'll tag your geographical coordinates, and I'm having a lot of fun with that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you have your own little map that you keep, like places I pushed from.
I have yet to actually make that map work, but knowing that I could makes me pretty happy.
Makes you feel pretty good. Cool. Well, thanks so much for sitting down and talking with me.
Thank you so much. This has been great, and thank you for being here. It's wonderful.
We love it. Happy to.
Coming up, Jared talks with Karthik Ram about the struggles he felt when trying to reproduce code in scientific research papers and how that led to rOpenSci, an organization which got started 5 years ago with the help of Twitter and a grant. We talk about the open source tools they've created for the data science community, how they got over $4 million in funding, and we also covered their plans to support and scale their thriving open science tools. Stay tuned. This episode is brought to you by Bugsnag. Bugsnag improves the task of troubleshooting errors by making it more enjoyable and less time consuming. For example, when an error occurs, your team can get notified via Slack, you can see diagnostic information on the error, you can identify the developer who committed the code, and Bugsnag's integration with Trello, Jira, GitHub, and many other collaboration tools makes it easy to assign and track bugs as they're being fixed. We have a special offer for our listeners. Head to bugsnag.com/changelog. Try out all the features completely free for 60 days. Once again, bugsnag.com/changelog.
So, Karthik Ram, here to talk about your open source project. Tell us about it. What's it called and what does it do?
So my name is Karthik, and I co-founded this project 5 years ago called rOpenSci. And back then, I was a regular scientist with a day job.
Okay.
Trying to reproduce other people's code and failing.
When you say reproduce their code,
Yeah.
what do you mean by that specifically?
So I would read a paper by somebody else, and they would say everything that we did is in the supplement, and I would run the code, and nothing would work.
I see. So you're taking code from a research paper and trying to execute it.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And nothing.
And it's failing.
Nothing works. And we
That
realized
sounds suboptimal.
much of scientific research is suboptimal. And then we realized that people are trying to do very specific activities that we can package into modules that we can release and say, if you're trying to do X or Y or munch this data or visualize this data, we have a library for it. So don't try to build this from scratch. We already have a module for it.
Okay. And that's 5 years ago.
5 years ago, and fast forward till now, we have almost $4 million in funding.
Wow.
We have a staff of about 7 people.
Wow.
We maintain 150 modules. We train people, and we build community.
How'd you get that done? In a nutshell.
Magic.
Yeah, exactly.
Just bootstrapping this thing one thing at a time. Yeah.
Okay. What do you think were the keys? So if you had to go back and say, well, these 3 things are the reasons why we've gotten to this point. And 3 is not necessarily, that's an arbitrary number.
No, but the things that worked out for us
Yeah.
was we built really tight software.
What do you mean by tight?
Like
Simple?
simple, robust, well-maintained.
Good.
Fixing every bugs that came along the way.
Okay.
And then people started trusting us. And then soon we started getting more and more buy-in from other people.
How did you get other people to use it initially?
Twitter.
Okay.
So we were tweeting things to the whole project came together through Twitter.
That's kind of amazing, isn't it?
I had a day job, 2 other people had a day job. We were tweeting at each other. And then one day we said, what's your email? Got each other's email, came up with a name for the project, and said, would you like to apply for funding? We wrote a grant together, got $200,000, and then
Just like that?
we became an entity. Yeah.
Wow. So there's apparently a huge need for what you were offering
Yep.
to just get a $200,000 grant. I mean,
Yeah, that was just the start, and then we realized things that we're doing, developing best practices, writing reusable modules. People are just dying for this stuff.
wow. Just found a huge gaping hole in the scientific community.
We did, and it still exists in a big way. So fast forward 5 years,
Yeah.
we maintain less than 20% of the software that we ship. Other people contribute to us. So other scientists who have a burning need for something write software and contribute that to our suite.
In like a plugin style, or what do you mean by contribute to your suite?
So they contribute a whole module to us,
Okay.
but we have a rigorous process by which we evaluate software. So we make sure everything is okay. There are unit testing. There's good documentation. They follow best practices.
Yeah.
So we put them through the whole ringer. And so by the time it comes out the other end, it's very good software. And then they go back and they realize oh, I learned a whole bunch of stuff that's new to me. And so collectively, we are elevating the quality of software in scientific research.
You're making it sound very easy.
It's not easy. It was. We've been riding a struggle bus for this whole time.
Riding a struggle bus.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Like
Everything's been hard.
everything's been hard. Funding has been hard. Getting community buy-in has been hard. But we're in a very good space right now.
Yeah.
You're
You're looking back at it, and so it's easy to talk about.
Yeah,
Looking back.
we've kind of become an authority in this space. We've built a voice in this space, and now people look to us for collaboration. To say we want to build this thing. We don't know where to start.
What have been specific struggles on the struggle bus that you faced, throughout the 5 years?
Getting institutional buy-in for our work.
Okay.
So getting people to trust that we built something that's really good. Funding has been a challenge because we have full-time staff that we need to support. And in open source, that's not an easy thing.
Right.
Yeah.
When did you move from? You mentioned the $200,000 grant up front.
Yeah.
Were you always staffed that way, or you say, well, we got $200,000, let's just let's quit our day jobs and do this right now, or did you slowly move into that?
So I was a postdoc doing actual research back then, and this was my distraction, doing open source. And Josh Greenberg, from the Sloan Foundation, who I got connected to through a bunch of people, believed in us and said, if you want to quit your day job and do this full time, I will back you. And sure enough, everything aligned.
Yeah.
And then I quit my day job. And then in a year, I made my collaborator quit his day job. And now we've made 7 people quit their day jobs.
Wow.
Yeah.
What are some challenges you face today? So 5 years in, you've got a lot done, but what are some challenges now that face you?
So the challenges we face right now is scaling. So every new person we want to add to our team is one other FTE that we need to support going forward. So our current budget is about $1 million a year. And to grow that beyond $1 million a year is very hard because we write software for public good. And it's very hard to do that if you don't actually generate revenue. Yeah.
So you're always going back to the well of, foundations that you've been relying upon.
Yeah, but we also realize that software that we build is making a huge impact on science across the board. And so we are trying to, in the future, reach out to people that fund primary research, like the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, and tell them that we support 27 projects that you fund. And so perhaps you should just fund us directly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you, is that like your new idea, or have you made those efforts?
No, that's our new idea.
Oh, it's your new idea. You
Yeah.
haven't tried it yet.
No, not yet.
So sounds like that's a good idea.
Yeah. Right? So,
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
we just want to reach out to like new funders and tell them we are maintaining key infrastructure that support people that you're trying to support.
Other struggles. So you got the funding side. Is the project at a size now where you have, is its needs beyond the 7 people, or you feel pretty well staffed?
We're in a good space right now. Some other struggles are kind of trivial at this point. We would like to get... our goal is to find the best talent we can find, no matter where they are and who they are and what they do. But politics and international law makes it very difficult to just randomly hire a contractor in Switzerland or Peru.
Right.
But we're trying to make it work, and we are trying to find organizations that can help us make this easier.
So if other people were to follow in your footsteps, I guess the first step would be find a huge need.
Yeah.
Which
is not hard, because there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that is waiting to be solved.
Specifically in research and science?
No, just in open source in
Everywhere.
general. Yeah. Good open source software is kind of hard to come by. And then good open source software that has a potential to be maintained is even harder to find. And so the fact that we've been around for 5 years and we have a fairly solid plan to keep this sustained makes a huge difference.
It sounds like a lot of people can probably learn from your experience, from your model. Are you doing any writing or documenting of like success and failures throughout the time, and something like a pathway for people to follow?
Great question. So we're trying to write a how-to for the whole thing.
Yeah.
And we're trying to incubate other projects that we can mentor. Yeah.
Okay. Progress on that is like it's
a new thing that we've started, but like any open source project, we're kind of stretched thin.
Yeah.
So even with 7 people, we have these grand ideas to give fellowships to new open source projects, provide support for interns like the Google Summer of Code. But we have all these grand plans that just take time and staff, and we're doing the best we can.
Give us some waypoints where people can go to either learn from your work or to help out with your work. What's the best way to get involved?
Oh, fantastic question. So we have tons of opportunities for people to get involved. If people just go to github.com/ropensci, so it's the letter R, the word open, and the letters SCI.
Yeah.
You can contribute code, you can contribute documentation, you can help us wrangle issues, and you're welcome to join our Slack. It's we have an open link on our website, and you can participate. But the other thing that we do that is really important to the open source community that doesn't exist elsewhere is that we review software.
You review software.
Yeah. So we allow community members like you to contribute software to our collection. And we put that through very rigorous review, just like a paper goes through review with reviewers.
Like code review?
Yeah, it's not even, it goes beyond code review. They review like your code, your license.
So this isn't software that's coming into your system, but this is anybody's software?
No, it's software coming into our
Okay,
system.
software coming in. You say review your license. Wouldn't you just have the license of the project? Or are you talking about modules? Do they hold their own licenses?
No, but we allow people to have permissive licenses. And so we make sure their license is compatible downstream.
Okay.
We make sure their code is well documented, has a good style that's easily adaptable. And it's a brilliant process because everything happens in the open on GitHub. And it takes our reviewers 5 to 10 hours each to review the software.
Wow, that's a long time.
And because it's open, it's completely non-confrontational. It's extremely friendly. And reviewers learn a lot, the contributors learn a lot, and in the end, the software comes out much stronger. And by the time we accept that into our suite, it's a fantastic piece of software.
How many of your processes specifically around software review, have you codified, automated, like taken 5 to 10 hours is a big investment. Like, can you reduce that down, or is it already streamlined and that's just what it takes?
You are like jumping the gun on things that we're doing. This is brilliant. So we are trying to build bots over GitHub that can do a lot of these things. Check code quality. We already have bots that can check for code coverage, test coverage, things like that. And so we're trying to reduce the burden on reviewers as much as possible. But I think the human interaction plays a big role, because people actually have conversations, substantial conversations about this is how I set up my code. And we think this is really important to building community. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think the best solutions today are still computer-assisted humans.
Yeah.
Right? Like reduce the burden as much as possible, but keep humans involved, until the...
humans make a huge difference.
They sure do. Until our deep learning overlords have learned everything they need to.
Yep.
For perfect software.
I will wait for that day in my self-driving car.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, Karthik, thanks for sharing that story. And check out github.com/ropensci.
Yep.
Sounds like a project to learn from and to get involved in. So check that out. And thanks for coming on the show.
And thanks for having me.
Up next, we talk with Andrea Goulet and Scott Ford about the love of legacy projects, legacy code, all that stuff most developers hate to deal with. Andrea and Scott run a consultancy called Corgi Bytes, whose sole focus is to support and maintain legacy code projects. We also learn their podcast, Legacy Code Rocks, is modeled after the changelog, which was very flattering. Check it out at legacycode.rocks. And we'll be right back. This episode is sponsored by Circle CI. Circle CI is a continuous integration and delivery platform that helps software teams rapidly release code with confidence by automating the build, test, and deployment process. They recently launched version 2.0 of their platform with a focus on providing faster build times thanks to advanced caching strategies and flexible resource allocation. Super fast build cycles ensure quality code by using SSH access and local builds to quickly troubleshoot and remediate. Flexibility to run CI and CD without limits. There's no pausing work while environments update, and language inclusivity frees up your team to use any toolchain or framework because Circle CI supports every language that runs on Linux. And finally, control. Workflows let your team run, build, test, deploy stages as individual jobs, which lets you fully customize your development process. There's a ton more to learn about Circle CI, so head to circleci.com/changelawpodcast. Once again, circleci.com/changelawpodcast to learn more.
I'm ready when you guys are. You guys look comfortable.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So with Andrea and Scott
Yeah.
with Corgi Bites.
Hi.
Hello.
Thanks
for
for
having us.
joining me.
Yeah. It's been a long time coming.
It has been. So Andrea, did we have you on the show previously, or we
No.
interviewed you for, maybe it was for our video series
I don't.
back in the day, or maybe we just hung out?
We hung out. You gave
Is
you
it-
gave me a ride at the airport
Okay.
when I was speaking at
Nebraska JavaScript Conference a couple years back.
Yeah. So, and we were like, oh, you should get on because we've got a podcast too. And it was like,
We were
yeah,
gonna
we should totally do
and
that.
then we
And
just
then
lost.
it didn't happen.
We lost each other. So here
yeah.
we have you on. You also have your own, as you mentioned, your own podcast, Legacy Code Rocks.
Yes.
Celebrating legacy code, talking
Yes.
about legacy code. What's that show like?
So it's very similar to the changelog, I think. We've
Oh.
really modeled ourselves after you, and I'm not
We're-
lying.
we're flattered.
Yeah. In that it's about conversations about a very broad subject that needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
But the whole idea is let's change the way we think about legacy code. Because legacy code has been seen as this thing that has a lot of shame around it.
Yeah, stay away from me.
Yeah.
And,
This is old and crufty.
And we've discovered that there's a very enthusiastic minority of developers.
It might be an understatement.
Yeah, they genuinely love working on legacy projects.
Really?
And I see a lot of overlap between legacy projects and open source projects. I think, most open source projects you could talk about in the context of legacy.
Yeah.
Like, let's talk about Vim.
Yeah.
For example,
Yeah.
is there much more legacy than, or Emacs? We've got these really old text editors, but they're still maintained, and the people who are working on them and diving into those code bases, they're diving into a legacy project.
Let me share a little secret, a little changelog secret. I think I may have told you about this back when we talked a couple of years back, because we were talking about legacy, and I actually had an idea for a show called Legacy
Yeah.
that was dedicated to telling the stories of software that stood the test of time.
Ooh,
Yeah.
And it would be like,
nice.
it would be like more, it wouldn't be interviews like conversational, it would be interviews, but
Yeah.
it'd be more like a vignettes.
Yeah.
And telling those stories because they have to be fascinating.
Yeah.
Of things like Vim, of all of the little tools that we use in Unix and stuff. And it's like LS, for instance. I mean, sure, a lot of those built-ins haven't been actively developed for a
Yeah.
long time, but nonetheless, their legacy, not because they're old and crufty, but because they've remained valuable for years and years and years.
Right.
And I think that's noteworthy and like something you should celebrate as opposed to denigrate.
Right. Yeah. And over the course of the project, because it originally started, a few years ago, where we were at an agile conference and they happened to have a software craftsmanship track.
Yeah, and I was speaking in
And
that.
you were
and then a lot of other
speaking-
people were too.
So was Llewellyn Falco, Lee Zuhl, Arlo Belshi, a lot of folks who just are
Michael Feathers.
Yeah, who kind of are known in the craftsmanship space. And they said, this is the first time that we all feel like there's where we can actually talk about legacy code and people don't look at us weird. Because you say that you like working on legacy code and people give you the third eye. They're like, what? Are you okay? And so we just started a Slack channel we'll start with these 5 people, and then now it's grown to 400, and we've got the podcast. We started a GitHub repository for open source projects, awesome legacy code, to kind of help curate some of those stories. And I think a big part of legacy code is a lack of communication around things.
Right.
So telling those stories and sharing that history is a really important part of the knowledge transfer of what went well, what could be better, what should change for your current project.
And one of the things that we like to do with the show, or to try to do with the show, is to really change attitudes and try to pivot the conversation away from legacy as this word with a huge negative connotation to it's a positive thing. It's it's what you've left behind. It's your benefit to society.
So I don't know if I've actually worked professionally on legacy code, and I have, I guess, definitions of semantics and stuff.
Yes.
But I've done a lot of what I call rescue projects.
Yes.
Which I think those are kind of in the same category, where
Yeah.
it's like this has fallen into a state of disrepair.
Yes.
And yet it's still valuable to this company for
Yes.
reasons
Yep.
X, Y, and Z. We need to save it.
Yep.
And I will just say that while I've gone into those projects carefully, I had a whole lot of fun, saving the day, so to speak, and taking something. It's kind of the same idea as when you flip a house.
Yeah.
You buy an old dilapidated
That's-
house and you repair it and you bring life back to this thing
Yeah.
again.
That's
And there's-
exactly what we call what we do. We say at Corgi Bytes that we do software remodeling.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
there is a real satisfaction there that's unexpected. And so I think you're definitely onto something. And as you mentioned, you guys do this professionally with Corgi Bites, and so
Yeah.
this is like Corgi Bites' thing, right?
Yeah.
And so
it was more like it was like, instead of doing sponsors, we'll just fund it through Corgi Bites and we won't stress about it.
right.
So we've kind of taken a different model and a different approach, but that just has meant that it's easier for us to maintain it.
But there's also, because like Corgi Bites can be a thriving consultancy.
Yep.
Is that what you guys consider yourself, or a software firm, or what do you guys?
Yeah.
I think consultancy. but-
Consultancy is fair.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
fair.
I sometimes
Folk-
say a group of people who are passionate about software maintenance and modernization.
Okay, maintenance and sales team right
Yes,
there.
exactly.
So however, if that's a consultancy or if it's a product team, it's
That's why you always let Andrea tell people what
yes.
it is.
Yes.
Scott's
That's
like,
why
yeah,
she talks
we're
a lot more than I do.
consultancy.
Yeah.
But I guess the reason why I point that out is because there's good money in doing the work that other people don't want to do.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you guys have found that? Or you're
We
giving
have-
me the
I mean,
side eye. Maybe there's not that good money.
I mean, I think with any business, there's always going to be ups and downs that
Sure.
fluctuate, right? But I mean, we've got a team of 12 people now, and we've got a backlog of resumes, surprisingly, of people who want to leave their current gig and come work for us.
Yeah. I feel like we
So-
have the inverse of what a lot of
Really?
technology firms have.
Which
where
is we were not expecting.
We have a lot of people wanting to work for you.
there was a lot of people who want to work for us, and we just don't have enough. We don't have enough clients to
Yeah.
hire everyone who would love to work for us.
Wow.
And so it's an interesting flip in the ecosystem where most firms can't find talent, and we have talent knocking down our doors. So
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Good problem to have, but still a problem. to
Yeah.
have.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, so coming to conferences like this, like talking about open source, because I think the big thing is, for me as a marketing person, I've heard Scott. I mean, originally the original kind of mission of Corgi Bites was you wanted to figure out how could I get paid to work on open source.
Yes, specifically fix bugs in open source projects.
Like, that's
I
your
love-
dream job.
I love fixing bugs specifically. Like hunting down a bug is like brings me more joy than almost anything else I can communicate.
Wow.
And hunting it down, fixing it, getting the fix pushed out, I love that. And if no other constraints on my life, that's what I would do full time for open source projects. And I would just bounce from project to project as my interests suited
That's
me.
very interesting.
And I would just fix bugs. I would add and if you look at like the open source projects I've contributed to across my career, very few features have been added.
Yeah.
Or if the features that haven't added, it's like I think of the lack of the feature being there as like a bug.
Yeah.
And
Like
it's
the
a-
tree view and Atom kind of.
yeah. So like I'm real proud of one of my contributions to Atom 1.0 was you can configure the tree view to sort the way macOS Finder sorts files. So it can be like alphabetical regardless whether it's a folder or a file.
Right.
And
And so that wasn't there, and you thought
that wasn't there, and
This
I
is
wanted
a bug. I'm going to add it.
Exactly. I was coming from TextMate, and I liked the way TextMate sorted things, and it sorted them that way, and I wanted that to be an option in Atom, so I added it.
That's very interesting. So it started off with like, how can I make a living fixing open source bugs?
Yeah, and we
Yeah.
quickly found that
You actually can't do that. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, not yet. But
yet, not yet.
So I was like, well, in my background in marketing, I was like, well, there's plenty of, we can pivot it and we can, say we do maintenance and modernization and
Right. Figure it out
We'll
somehow.
figure it
Yeah.
out and at least make it so
It
that we
seems
can
like
get
you're
paid.
you're like looping around to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Or we
kinda
can't
were-
start there, but maybe we can end up there.
Right.
Well, it's interesting too because my background is in content strategy and copywriting, and I always wanted to be a copywriter, but for applications, not for marketing
Okay.
websites. Like I've done it for, large enterprise companies, but I was like, I want to be the copywriter. Like I want to go in and fix all of your error messages and move them from passive voice to active voice
Oh.
and from third person to second person, right?
You should come hang out with me.
Or to make them make them helpful users.
Yeah.
Right.
Error
So
messages.
I did that on
yeah.
Bundler. Like that was how I got
Yeah.
started. Was I just said, here, let me go in and update error messages, and
Yeah.
they got accepted.
Yeah.
But it's hard for me to find time to do that, and so it's like, how
Yeah.
can we figure out? These are the things that we love. How can we figure out how to make a sustainable
especially
business out of
especially as
that?
like parents who are also business owners. I mean, it's like we're different phases of our life than I was when I was a lot younger. And,
Yeah.
And kind of like recognizing the amount of privilege that goes into being able to contribute to an open source project.
Yeah.
And just like the economic privilege, like that I have free time. I have time that
Right.
that I don't need to be doing anything else, and I have mental energy to put in this direction.
That's a really, yeah.
That's a good point, because sometimes you have the time, but you're just out of the mental energy because you've spent it on things you need to.
Right.
And now maybe you're in a place where you're not completely time strapped, but I know I get to the end of certain days and there's just no way I'm going to kick out the editor and do anything of quality. Maybe I can add some bugs.
Yeah.
I'm not going to fix any bugs.
And part of it is like, how easy is it, right? So if you don't have good documentation, like how is, do you have continuous deployment set up so that, you can just kick something off and, or is it going to be this big back and forth where you haven't developed a relationship with the maintainer? So there's kind of a lot of idiosyncrasies there of, do people want me to go in and fix their error messages? I don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
So. Just thinking about a lot of the recent conversations, both here at Sustain and elsewhere, around the value of non-code contributions and really the desire or the need, not just for sustainable projects, but for healthy projects.
Yeah.
And one of the things I would like to have this conversation here with people, I haven't quite opened it up, is like, does healthy and sustainable mean the same thing, or are there distinctions? I think there are distinctions, but that's a conversation to be had. But definitely we all see that valuing and recognizing the value of non-code contributions as such a necessary thing and something that's been lacking for a very long time.
And even in like my focus of like, I love to fix bugs, issue triage becomes the first step of that. And I see that as a non-code contribution of, I go in, it's, I'll sort by oldest. I'll go into GitHub and sort the issues by oldest.
You're a saint.
And
Who's this guy?
I know, right?
He's just going to go into some projects, sort by oldest.
That's what he does. And
start fixing stuff.
And I'll first try to reproduce it, right? And this doesn't look like it's an issue anymore. And at least leave a comment.
Would you like me to clean it up?
Right. And, at least leave a comment, either for the maintainer, maybe this can be closed, maintainer. It's it's been open for 4 years. Maybe I can't reproduce it.
Right.
No one else has commented on it in 4 years. Maybe it's
not relevant anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Versus, hey, I've confirmed that this is still an issue and it's been an issue for 4 versions. I'll dive in and fix it.
Yeah. So the interesting thing to me is, you've got Scott and we've got the supply figured out. Right, because we've built a whole team of people who basically flock to Scott and are magnets to him, because it's like, you like doing that, I like doing that too, right?
I want to come work for him already.
I know, right? It's awesome. And but then you also have the demand, but yet the supply and the demand, there's a lot of bugs that need to be fixed, but there's a lot of people who want to fix them.
Arbitrage that needs to happen.
But, what is that thing that is preventing these two needs from happening and working together?
Yeah.
So
where's the virtuous cycle that would have those benefiting each other?
Yeah, and we've done things through Corgi Bytes. We said, okay, well, we'll use open source whenever we can, and then when we're building on a client and it's genuinely client work, we'll make fixes as it goes. And so in that way, we'll continue to contribute, and we do. We've also had a couple of clients who have paid, they are supported by a foundation, so they have us just kind of come in for a few months, clean up their backlog, do issue tracking, things like that.
Yeah, one of our clients, their project's hosted on GitHub in the open, and we helped them out with moving forward on a Rails upgrade from 3.2 to 4x.
Yeah.
Nice.
So basically, enhancing documentation so that we can be kind of an augment of that. Right. But I think it's even more systemic than that. And are there different business models like open source insurance that companies could pay for on a specific project, or could they use the Patreon model where it's an individual developer contributes and says, I value this, so we're not relying so much on enterprises or organizations. So you had a couple other ideas too, where
I have a blog post, and I had 3, but I can't remember the third. I'm really embarrassed. But one was insurance, one was kind of a patron model where you have a large, I remember the third one. The third one was kind of a collective of organizations that depend heavily on a particular project. Having that group of people or organizations or whatever come together to fund a full-time person on that project. And to do so, maybe the money for that would be managed through something transparent like Open Collective, but the kind of recognizing that there are smaller businesses out there who depend on open source projects just as much as the really big companies do, but they can't afford to hire somebody full time.
Full-time staff members.
But they probably could afford maybe a tenth of a full-time person. So if you had 10 of those companies come together, then you do have a full-time person who's funded to keep that project healthy.
Yeah, I think maybe part of the problem, just thinking about how open source creeps into organizations over the years, and it's been a very ground up, grassroots, like an engineer by engineer, either not asking for permission or like convincing just the person above them that this is a good idea.
Yeah.
And to the point where a lot of these organizations don't even realize.
And I feel that came out in the data from the survey, the open source survey that GitHub just recently published. It was like this lack of clarity on policy, but everybody's doing it anyway.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Or they say they're free to do it, but not to contribute back. But which is super weird.
You had that at, when you were working at a large company that does consulting for federal government.
Yeah, that was owned by, a company that had like 3 open source projects, and I'm trying to be kind and not use names. So, but that company's culture was very anti-open source, and so this anti-open source culture had infected the subsidiary that I worked for, and I was using one of our parent company's open source projects at a client site, and found a bug in it, and fixed the bug, and went to go contribute the fix back, and had to like get a copyright authorization, letter signed by my legal team. So I passed it along, and it like opened up this can of worms. Like, wait, you're using open source at one of our clients? Like, wait, you're using open source in general? Like, our culture doesn't support open source. And so it was this really interesting, like for a minute, I thought I was going to get fired.
Yeah.
Like, I thought I genuinely might get fired.
How'd it pan out?
The change was accepted.
Okay.
Like, just
paperwork went through.
Paperwork went through. The change was accepted. But yeah, it was kind of like a slap on the wrist, and they then published they created a policy saying that like if you're using open source at a client site, you need to make it very clear to the client that you're using open source. Was kind of what was, and that the client needs to be involved in that decision-making process. Yeah.
So the way that I do it with my consultancy is kind of your guys' first. I think he's all right. It's kind of your guys' first method of. I work it into my contract. Kind of like 2 levels of deliverables, where it's like first party deliverables and like second party, and those are open source things.
Yeah.
And so I feel very free in my work as they're relying, like their entire stack is built upon open source, and so I see this issue or this problem or a place that needs fixing, and I just plug the hole. And I don't ask each individual client, hey, can I go do this bug fix?
Yeah.
That being said, because of the way that I do it, I don't feel free to make large contributions. Right. It's fine for a bug fix, or even sometimes just submitting the bug is a value, right?
Yeah.
Like reporting. Otherwise, maybe a small, like I'm changing this API to accept 2 things instead of one.
We had to build a small gem once.
We built a couple small gems
but
to
it
fill a
doesn't,
crack like that.
I do not feel free. I do not feel like it's in my client's best interest to go and spend 20 hours building a brand new thing or a huge feature, which probably would be generally usable to lots of people.
Right.
And so there has to be other ways.
Yeah, we're in the same thing. And I think you mentioned something really important, which is the legal framework around it, because we had the same thing. We had our attorney look at everything and through the lens of open source, and I think that's something that most consultancies might forget, is that there's a lot of IP related things here, and so we have it in our master services agreement that you are allowing us to use and to spend.
And I've had a couple of clients
push
push back on that particular point as well, or at least ask for clarification.
Yeah, we have as well. So because like we have a clause in there that says if we make a change to a third party open source project, that change is governed under that license, and doesn't belong to the organization we're working with. And because I don't want to be in violation of a GPL, copy left license. I don't want there to be a conflict between the contract that I've signed with the client and the license they're using from a particular open source project.
Yeah, and it's so funny because we're going through this with a client now. It's like everything's great, everything's looking good, and it's like, okay, now I just need to get my legal team to run past it, or my CEO, and then we get I've reviewed hundreds of contracts and I have never seen a clause like this that requires this type of intellectual property treatment. And we're like, well, that's because we've actually thought about how we use open source, and this is the way it has to be. And so I think that gets to and one of the things that I've been really encouraged about at the conversations today is how do we broaden the experience and invite people who are, have more business experience, so that open source doesn't feel like it's just a group of software developers.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a cohesive and integrated, collaborative, cross-disciplinary team.
Get more kinds of people to the table.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
From different walks of life, but also from different areas of business. And
Right.
Yeah.
It's like the textbook definition of diversity is not on this stratosphere or that one, but like all of them, right?
Well,
all
and
stratoms.
it's very small things. So like today, for example, they had childcare, right? So we were the only ones who took it. So Scott and I are also married. We were business partners first.
Yeah.
So we'll give a quick origin story. So Scott and I went to high school together, reconnected our 10-year reunion. Scott was running the business, said, I have no idea what I'm doing in terms of marketing. Can you come help? And so I did, and then we got married 2 years later, and now we have 2 kids. And so a lot of times, like if Scott and I both want to participate in conversation,
we have to decide who stays home.
We have to decide who stays home.
Yeah.
And I'm usually the one where it's like, well, Scott, your voice kind of feels more relevant here.
I feel the same way about her. So
Yeah.
Scott, your voice is more relevant.
Yeah.
I don't know. You got away with words, so I don't.
Well,
I know.
it's like-
It probably depends on his confidence level is probably lower. Well, but then,
But
I don't know. I can see both sides.
See,
Depends on the conference.
Imposter syndrome can
Right.
creep in
That's
front
why.
of her, right?
That's why I backed that off a second. Because
Yep.
I thought, well, maybe not.
No,
Yep.
because I get really bad imposter syndrome around like, am I technical enough?
Yeah.
Right? Like I don't actually contribute value. All I do is fix error messages and improve documentation.
And Andrea's
not valuable.
Andrea's a much stronger presenter though. Like she, her voice carries. I'm really quiet. Like I have to have the mic like up my nose practically. Yeah, as Jared turns the mic towards my face. So yeah, it's.
But when there's child
So
care, we don't
anyways,
have to think about it.
You don't have to
right?
make that choice.
Right.
Right.
And then, for example, like Gunnar, like he said, just be mindful of how, like, these are biases where, women are typically note takers. So just be mindful of that.
Right.
And, as you go throughout the day. And small little things like that have made a huge difference in my ability to feel not just that I am welcome here, but that it's like I can continue to be here. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
awesome job to the Sustain organizers.
There you go.
Yes.
Shout out to all the organizers. Any last thoughts? This has been a great conversation. I think we should. I think I need to come on your Legacy Code
Please
Rocks and we
do.
can just talk Legacy
Oh
Code.
Yes.
gosh, yeah.
Love to.
I'll just
it's
nerd
so
out
much
with you
fun.
guys.
And
That's
yeah,
the
I would
whole
say
special show,
we're
so.
always looking for folks who are interested in being guests. So I know that there's a lot of folks who
Absolutely.
Kind of are on both. The changelog is on their feeds, so we listen to it. You listen to it every night when you do the dishes.
Yeah. This has changed like while I do the dishes.
Well, you might have to hear your own voice on an upcoming. What the heck? Oh, this episode's terrible.
It'll be all good. So
As we all self-criticize. So very
Yes.
cool. So LegacyCode.rocks is the podcast.
Yep.
Corgi
Yeah,
Bites
right now
is
that's the
company.
newsletter we're working towards, and you can find the podcast in Stitcher or iTunes if you just look up Legacy Code Rocks.
Very cool.
And then there's from the newsletter, you can join the Slack channel and things like that. One of these days we'll have a whiz-bang website like you do and fancy microphones.
Yeah. And then we also have like a weekly mastermind group that's kind of like a.
What's that?
It's kind of like a virtual meetup.
Okay.
Basically, where I'm almost always there, and then whoever shows up at a given time.
What do you guys talk about?
Whatever the people who show
Yeah.
up want to talk about. So it's
Oh,
very
wow.
much a kind of just a free form meetup kind of style. And there are people who come in and lurk and just listen. They'll like turn off the cameras and mute their microphones and just listen to the conversation. Maybe we could start recording them. That might be content to be worth sharing.
I was gonna say it sounds like a podcast to me.
So sometimes we'll do some group pairing on like different projects, like different techniques. It's really whatever people talk about that they want to bring. Sometimes we've had people go like really struggling with how to solve this particular problem, and then we'll help that person with it. It's
Very
so
cool.
it's neat.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Scott, Andrea, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
having us.
All right, thanks for tuning into the Changelog this week. If you enjoyed the show, share it with a friend, rate us in Apple Podcasts. Huge thanks to our friends behind Sustain, Justin Dorfman, Pia Mancini, Chad Whitaker, GitHub for hosting it, and the many others who made that one-day conversation possible. Also, huge thanks to our sponsors for making this show possible, Hired, Bugsnag, and Circle CI. Also, thanks to Fastly, our bandwidth partner. Head to fastly.com to learn more. and we host everything we do on Linode cloud servers. Head to linode.com/changelog to learn more. Check them out, support the show. This show is hosted by myself, Adam Stacoviak, and Jared Santo. It's edited by Jonathan Youngblood, and the awesome music you've been hearing is produced by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. You can find more episodes just like this at changelog.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.